The Danish Deception, Part 1.
Danish Deception, Part 5. Okay, so he comes out of the baggage claim past customs, and I see him, and immediately I'm hit with a realization that I've got it so bad. And if you've never been in love before, falling in love for the first time is like getting swallowed by a current, and you don't even know it's there, and you're good one moment, and then before you realize it, you're in deep, and there's nothing you can do to control it. And that's how I felt. And I knew this man has the power to destroy me, and that was exhilarating but also terrifying at the same time. And I was just really excited to integrate him with my people, and most importantly, I was excited for him to meet Smokey, who is just my world. And watching the way he was with Smokey, they instantly became best friends, and Smokey grew really attached to him. And I mean, I knew I had fallen in love with him, but I realized I hadn't even scratched the surface when I saw him with Smokey. And so we did a lot of things that trip. So we went to a Cowboys game, we went to a retirement party for a partner at my accounting firm, we went to a couple dinners, and then we also just stayed at home. I cooked a lot. I remember I made him red stew and rice, which is my favorite Nigerian food. It's a staple. And I put a lot of habanero peppers, and I remember being nervous, like, can he handle spice? And he ate it and he loved it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this white boy loves spice. This is perfect. And everything just felt like, again, it felt like everything was aligning. And so I wanted to plan something special for him to meet all of my close friends and family. And so I was like, oh, well, maybe we can go meet for a drink. And he said, like, we can go out to eat. I'll pay for everything. I was like, are you sure? He said, absolutely. So I planned a brunch, and we went to brunch here in Dallas, and it was a handful of my really close friends, and my two sisters were there, and my cousin and his now wife was there too. So we sit down at brunch, and everyone's like asking him questions, and everyone is just so impressed by him. Again, we're dealing with someone that's very charming, very charismatic. And the thing about my ex is when you meet him, he's so good at asking questions, and he's good at listening. And so it's really easy to get into good conversation with him, and it's really easy to connect with him. And so we had a great brunch. I remember I was like in the bathroom, and my friends followed me, and they're like, oh my gosh, he's amazing. Like, we're so happy for you. And I just, I was so grateful to call him mine. And so after brunch, we go grab a drink at a place nearby the restaurant. And at that point, we're all just kind of like chit-chatting, and my cousin and my ex are having a conversation. And this cousin is like a second brother to me. We're very close. And I desperately wanted to get the stamp of approval from him. And so obviously they're shooting their shit, and I'm eavesdropping on the conversation 100%, and because I can. And I'm like overhearing them just like, talking about random stuff. And then I hear my cousin ask him, you just have the build of an athlete. Did you play sports? And my ex goes, yeah, I actually played handball. And my cousin goes, isn't that an Olympic sport? And my ex goes, yeah, I actually went to the Olympics twice. And I immediately inserted myself into the conversation. I go, you went to the Olympics? What? And he goes, you know what? I was like the backup of the backup. I didn't even play. I don't like to brag about it because I don't think it's that big of a deal. I was like, well, did you get medals? He was like, yeah, I got a bronze and I got a gold. I was like, well, that's amazing. Like, I'm so impressed. And so now I'm thinking, this man is so humble. So let's add humble to the list of all the reasons why he's such an amazing man. So obviously we had a wonderful trip. He came to Dallas. Again, I did not spend any money while he was here. I obviously paid money for groceries when he wasn't around, but other than that, he wanted to pay for everything. He didn't even want me to pay for ice cream, small things. He was like, I want to treat you. And I was like, okay, that's fine. So I remember he was leaving to go back to Denmark, and I was so depressed. And if anyone has been in a long distance relationship, you know how difficult it is to say goodbye. And so I was so depressed, and I'm saying goodbye to him at the airport. I'm bawling my eyes out. We finally say goodbye. He goes through security. I go home, and I just am crying for hours. I'm so depressed. And I remember I was supposed to go to a birthday party that night, and I texted my friend. I was like, I literally cannot stop crying, so I can't go to this birthday. And I hate canceling things. And so that's how bad it was. I was actually depressed for literally days. And after he got through security, he was like, I can't even walk to the terminal. I'm so depressed. I just want to walk back out and just come back to you. And I was like, I want that too. And he said, we need to start having the hard conversations on what we want for the future. And I said, absolutely. And so he was like, we need to decide whether or not we're going to live in Denmark or live in Dallas. And I still can't believe this came out of my mouth. But I told him, I said, listen, I know you already have a very much established career. And so if you want me to move to Denmark, I'm more than happy to have that conversation with you and discuss it. And he said, you know, looking at you with your friends and your family this past week has made me realize that I don't want to take that away from you. And you're really close with your parents, they're driving distance away, and like, I live in Copenhagen, my family lives in my hometown in Aalborg, which is hours away. I don't have family in Copenhagen, and I want us to be around family, especially like if we're talking about having kids one day. Like, I want that support, and I want you to be around the people that you love. And so I was so happy, because realistically I did not want to move to Denmark, and so I was so happy that this man is willing to give up everything to be with me. So I was so excited about that. So he was gone for about 3 weeks to a month at this point, and he hadn't booked his flight back to Dallas yet, and then he booked it on like a Thursday, I remember it. So now we're in the middle of October of 2022. He books his flight, and he said, okay, I'm coming next week, Wednesday. And I said, okay, perfect, and I'm getting all excited again. And so I called him Friday morning, and keep in mind that there's a time difference, so it's like about 7 hours. So whenever I wake up at like 5 or 6, he's basically halfway through his day. And so I called him that Friday, and I said, hey, like, how's your day been? He's like, it's been such a stressful, intense day. I go, what happened? And he's like, I found out that the apartment complex that I bought is dealing with some major foundation issues, like it could affect safety of the tenants, and I'm really stressing out, and I need to get it fixed. And I was like, oh, okay, like, did you schedule the repair? He's like, not yet. It's gonna cost like a hefty chunk of change. I was like, how much is it gonna cost? He's like, $50,000. I was like, $50,000? What? Like, that's obviously a lot of money. I'm sure it's a lot of money to a lot of you. It's a lot of money to me. And so I was like, okay, like, what's the plan? He's like, I mean, I have a good portion of it, so I just need to ask my dad for a little bit of a loan. And so I remember being like, I can never in a million years ask my dad for a loan of $50,000. So at this point, I was aware of the fact that like they had this royal title, they had this family trust that like, and like the family had money. I didn't really know like how much or the details behind it, but he told me he was gonna call his dad and ask him for a loan. So a couple hours go by, he calls me, and he's really upset. He's like, I talked to my dad on the phone. He will not loan me the money. He says, I've been acting super irresponsible, traveling, doing all these things, and so he just doesn't wanna, he thinks I need to like learn from my actions, and if I'm not prepared for something like this, then there's nothing he can do to help me. And so I felt really bad for him, because he essentially felt like his dad was abandoning him, and I felt really bad for him. And so I said, what's the plan? He's like, I'll figure it out. Like, even if I have to like sell some things, like, I'll figure it out. And I was like, okay, well, keep me updated, like whatever you need. And so a couple days go by, and he's communicating that he's still stressed out about coming up with this money. And so I said, you know what, like, I can loan you the money. And so at this point, I had paid off my student loans, paid off my car, bought a house. Like, had a decent savings. I was in a really, really good financial position. And so I wanted to help him, especially because like this man has like treated me so well and done so much for me. And I truly felt like we were in a partnership, especially like when you're talking about the future with someone. And so I told him, like, let me loan it to you. He goes, I would never in a million years borrow money for you. And I was like, it's okay. Like, I don't mind helping. He's like, that's like not even a discussion I want to have. And I said, okay, that's fine. So a couple of days go by, and he's still stressing out about coming up with this money. I asked him, like, how much do you need? He's like, it's $10,000 I need. And I was like, again, like, let me loan it to you. He said, no, I'm not taking money from you. And then a couple days go by, and he says, okay, like, now I need $6,000. And I was like, okay, again, let me give it to you. He's like, no, I still don't want to take money from you. And then basically, like, 2 days before he's supposed to come to Dallas, he tells me, he says, just letting you know, I'm not be able to come to Dallas because I need to figure out this issue. And at this point, I start freaking out, because I'm like, no, like, I 100% like want you to come still. Just let me loan you the money so that you'll be fine, and we can, you know, be happy and be together. And so after some thinking, he was like, okay, fine, I will borrow the money from you, but you have to promise me that this will be the only time, and that you're 100% comfortable with giving me this money. And I said, absolutely, I'm 100% comfortable. And we will continue on in part 6. The Danish Deception, part 6. Okay, so I've decided to loan him this money, and he's agreed to it. So I download this app, it's called Revolut, and it's kind of like Venmo, where you can send money internationally instantly. So I download it. It took like a day to like verify all my information, and I was able to send him the $6,000, and the next day he flew into Dallas to come be with me. And so that trip was really fun. We really didn't do a whole lot. I remember we just like went to the state fair, and we went to dinner like once, and the rest of the time we just hung out at home. And I remember it was hard for him because he was dealing with some really bad back pains, and I think it was just because he was flying a lot, and he said he injured his back when he was playing handball. So I remember I was giving him like back massages like almost every single day because it was really, really bad. And so this trip was very, very short. He was only there for a week, but I would say this was a very special trip for us because this was like the first time that he actually started making friends, like through me. And I started watching him start to make guy friends. And so this was when I got even more excited because I felt like we were really starting to, build a life here in Dallas together. So he leaves, obviously, again, I'm depressed again. And at this point, I know he's definitely planning on coming to Dallas for Thanksgiving to meet my parents, but I didn't know when he was planning on flying back. And so basically he's gone, and I feel like the second he leaves, like everything just kind of like starts to like fall apart for him. And so for starters, his back pain was getting like much, much worse. He was complaining about it every single day. Like he would text me in the middle of the night being like, it hurts so bad. And I felt terrible because I wanted to help him, but there was nothing I could do because I'm living 5,000 miles away. On top of that, his uncle, who was really sick with cancer, had passed away, and he told me the funeral was gonna be the next week. And I remember telling him, I will fly to Denmark if I need to, if you want me to be there for you. And he's like, no, it's fine. Like I can handle it. It's okay. And so basically that happened. And then I remember I went to Charlotte to go visit one of my girlfriends who had just had a baby. One of my girlfriends that I've been friends with for years and years since college. And so I'm in Charlotte with my friend, and I get a text from him. He's saying, hey, my dad's in the hospital. And I was like, oh my gosh, what happened? And he was like, we still don't understand what happened, but the doctors are running tests. And so later on that day, he told me that he had blood poisoning, and he had like, his infection numbers were like going crazy. And I remember telling him, well, if you're not able to come to Dallas in November, obviously I'll understand, especially like if your dad's in the hospital, like I understand completely. Again, I told him, I'll be there for you if you want me to. He's like, it's okay. Over the course of the next couple days, his dad started to show some more improvement. So he ended up deciding to come to visit me in Dallas. So now we're in November of 2022. So he comes back to Dallas, and basically this was a very exciting trip because number one, I used to be on the board of an organization called UIU. It's a nonprofit that celebrates Igbo Nigerian culture, and my culture is so important to me. And so I was the event coordinator for the Dallas chapter, and I was so proud of this. Like we had just won chapter of the year out of all the chapters in the nation. It was just such a huge accomplishment for me and my whole board. And I remember my cousin, who I told you guys I'm really close with, he was the president. And so we had a huge gala that we planned that year, and we had people flying in from all over the country to come. And obviously it took a lot of planning, and I was working really hard to make sure it was executed perfectly. I remember the day of the gala comes, and he is helping me set up, do everything that entire day. And this was the first time that I fully like integrated him with a bunch of Nigerians. And I was really curious to see how he was gonna react to being with all these people, because obviously Nigerians are so much fun, but some people might think we're a little bit too much. Forget them, but I wanted to make sure that he wasn't one of those people. So we have the gala, he helps me set up all day, and I'm just kind of watching him at the gala, just talking to people, and he's getting along with everyone. He's dancing to the Afro beats, and I just feel like, okay, he really takes my culture seriously. Like he wants to make sure that I know that he's gonna make sure this is a part of his life too. And I remember just being really happy about that. And so after the gala was done, it was a couple days, and my parents came to visit me in Dallas for Thanksgiving. And so I remember he went to go stay at a hotel because my parents, obviously, they're Nigerian, very traditional. We wanted to be respectful. So he went and stayed at a hotel, and my parents came to visit, and he was here when my parents got in town. And I'm telling you, my parents fell in love with him immediately. And I think watching him with my dad it just warmed my heart because they just instantly connected. And my dad, like everyone else, was very fascinated by him. And I remember the following day we went to African market with my parents. It was just me, my ex, and my parents. And he's talking to my parents about the Olympics, and they're asking him all these questions. And he was like, yeah, like the gold medal I gave to my mom, she has it. And then the bronze medal, I actually donated it to charity. And I'm just like, this guy is just so freaking amazing. And so we had an amazing Thanksgiving. It was his first Thanksgiving in the state. And my grandmother had recently just passed away. And this is my dad's mom. It was really, really sad. And he was talking to us about the plans for the burial. And so he said, we're gonna do the burial in May. It's gonna be in the village in Nigeria. And he looks at my dad and he says, I'll be there. And I remember looking at him like, I don't think you really understand what you're agreeing to. And he said, I don't care. I'm going to be there. I'm like, we're talking about the village in Nigeria. We're not just talking about like a big city where you can get a little bit of culture shock, but you like, or go back to your hotel. And no, we're talking about being in the village. And he said, I don't care. I'm going to be there. And so that was when I realized like this man really takes my culture seriously. He wants to be there for me. He wants to be there for my family. And that meant so much to me. And so at the end of the trip, I told him, I said, this week has showed me that I know that I want to spend my life with you. And I'm just, thank you for being the man that you are. And he said, I want to spend my life with you. And I'm going to let you know, like, I already know that I want to marry you someday. Like, and I don't want you to ever doubt that. And so he asked me, he's like, I have a question. Like, do you have an idea of what ring you would want? And I was like, I mean, I have some ideas, but I have not thought about it really extensively. And so he said, what are your thoughts on us going ring shopping? And keep in mind, at this point, we've been dating for like 4 months. And so I was like, okay, let's do it. So we found a jeweler. We went and we tried on some rings. I remember I'm trying on lab grown and natural, and I'm like looking at the price differences, and I'm like, I am not allowing you to buy me a natural stone because that number is just crazy. I'd rather us spend money investing, doing other things. And he said, well, let me look into it because I kind of do want to get you natural. And I was like, no, we're getting a lab grown. And I remember like if you've gone ring shopping, the price difference is like astronomical. And so I remember I picked out a ring that I really liked, and then we left, and that was basically the end of like the rings for that moment. And so he goes back to Denmark, and the plan was for me to go on a trip with him for Christmas. As I mentioned previously, my parents were traveling for Christmas, and him and his older sister do not have a relationship. Like, they can't be in intimate settings together, so they alternate Christmases. Like, he had last Christmas, so this Christmas was her Christmas. So we already had planned to spend Christmas together. And so originally we were talking about going to South Africa, like I mentioned before, and then we started looking at flights, and he was like, it's a long trip, I only want to fly business, and they were like $12,000 round trip. And he's like, well, maybe we can make it work. I was like, we are not spending that much on flights to South Africa, that's not happening. And so I started looking at other flights, and then we talked about maybe going to Brazil, and then he tells me, okay, make an itinerary and look at hotels and flights and everything and send it to me, and I'll book it. We're gonna go to Brazil. I said, okay, sounds good. So I wake up one day, I said, hey, did you book the travel? And he was like, no, I haven't, but there's something I need to talk to you about. I go, what's up? He goes, so I talked to a doctor because my back has gotten really, really bad, and it turns out I have 2 herniated discs, and I'm gonna need to get surgery. And I said, okay, like, that's fine. And he said, I'm gonna have to get surgery December 21st. And I said, oh, wow, okay, well, that's fine. We don't need to go on a trip. I'll just come to Denmark and I'll help you recover and everything. And he said, actually, no, I don't want you to come to Denmark. I want you to be there, but I don't want that to be the first time you meet my parents, and they definitely want to be there. And at this point, I'm like, what do you mean? I'm your girlfriend, and we're talking about a future. Why would I not be there when you're getting a major surgery? And I will continue on in part 7. Okay, Danish deception, part 7. So he tells me that he needs to get a back surgery, and he does not want me to come to Denmark because he wants me to meet his parents with him there because there's a serious language barrier, and he wants to make sure that I can communicate with them through him. And he's like, I don't want you to be using Google Translate to talk to them the first time you meet them. And yeah, and at first I was really upset because I felt like he wasn't treating me like I was his family. And I remember having a conversation to my mom about it because I was really frustrated. And she asked me, she said, do you think his parents know about you? And I remember I got really defensive because I told her, in what world would his parents not know about me? And I told him, I really want to be there. I was still kind of like pushing on him for like the full day. And I remember like that was like one of our first like little fights. At this point, we had not fight at all. Like, we have not had a single fight in the last 4 months because it's December of 2022. And so I told him, I said, listen, I really want to be there for you. And he was like, honestly, I don't want to like fight about this anymore. Like, let's just put this to rest. And I remember being frustrated because I also didn't have plans for Christmas because my family was going to be traveling, and I had planned to spend Christmas with him. So I remember I reached out to my best friend, Natalie. I was talking to her about the situation, and she said, why don't you fly to New York, spend a couple days with me, and then we'll go spend Christmas in Boston with my family. And I said, okay, like, we can do that. And so I brought up the option to my ex. He said, I think that's a great idea. I obviously don't want you to spend Christmas by yourself. And so I said, okay, that works. And I'm obviously extremely sad because at this point I hadn't seen him in weeks, and now I don't know when I'm going to see him again because he's getting this surgery on December 21st. So I make plans, book my flight to New York, and a couple days before I leave, he told me, maybe what we can do is you can come to Denmark maybe a couple days after my back surgery, because the doctors say that I need to be up walking a couple days afterwards, and I think it's just my mom that's gonna come. So what we can do is you can come meet my mom, and we can go see like the Christmas lights, and at that point I'll be able to translate and everything. And so I said that's fine. So I was like, I'll fly to New York, go to Boston, spend Christmas with my friend Natalie, and then I'll also have like an extra bag packed for like things to wear in Copenhagen, and just make sure I'm prepared to figure out what the plan is whenever he tells me. And so I think we had decided that it was December like 26th or 27th that I was gonna go to Copenhagen and then spend like a week there. So I go to New York, have a great couple days with my friend Natalie, and then on like the second day I'm in New York, I get a message from him, and he said, oh my goodness, my dad's back in the hospital. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry to hear that. He's like, his infection numbers are bad again, his blood poisoning again, and he ended up getting diagnosed with leukemia. And I just, I wanted to be there for him. And I said, like, do you want me to come? Like, I want to be there for you. Like, I don't want you to feel like you have to navigate through these things without having like your partner there to support you. And he said, right now, I just need to like focus on my family, and I'm grateful for you to be here, but I also don't want you to meet my dad for the first time in a hospital bed. And I'm obviously frustrated because I really want to be there for him, but I also don't want to be too pushy, because I'm like, this is your family, your dad's in the hospital. I don't want to put too much on him. And so we made the decision that I was just going to be kind of like on standby, which was fine because I was with my best friend Natalie, and I love her so much. And so I was having honestly a wonderful time with her and her family. And so we had left New York, went to Boston. Obviously, I'm still in constant communication with him, trying to figure out what's happening. And he sends me a message. I think it's on December 23rd. He sends me a message and he says, I'm so angry. I just got into a fight with my sister. And maybe like 5 minutes later, he gives me a call, and I'm like, what happened? He said, we're sitting in the hospital room, and my dad is obviously laying in the bed, and my older sister looks to me and says, so where are you spending Christmas? And I said, not with you, bitch. And it turned into a huge fight. They start screaming at each other in the hospital. He storms out. He feels so disrespected. His mom's upset. His little sister's upset because they're already spending some of their holidays in the hospital, and like now like they have all this tension in the family. And so I remember just being like so confused as to like why his sister is like this awful person. Like, why is she treating you like this, especially at a time when your dad is not doing okay? And so he calls me. He's like, I'm just so upset. Like, I want to get away. And I said, well, let me know what you need from me. Like, I'm literally a plane ride away. And he said, well, I obviously, like, now that I'm like don't want to be around my family, I would love to see you. And I said, okay, well, I can book a flight to Copenhagen and come stay with you. And he said, I don't know, I just kind of feel like I just need to get out of Denmark. And at that point, he was obviously in his hometown in Aalborg, which is 4 hours north of Copenhagen. And so he took a train back to Copenhagen. He's spending Christmas completely by himself, so sad. And we're still trying to iron out what the plans are. And he, again, tells me, I want to leave Denmark. And I was like, are you sure? Because at this point, like, I knew that I wouldn't say we were having like financial issues, but I knew like obviously there was like a little bit of tension with like all of his expenses that were adding up. And so I was like, it might be easier for me to just fly there and I can just stay with you. And he's like, I just really want to get away. And I said, okay, where do you want to go? He said, have you been to Paris before? And I said, no, I actually have not been to Paris. And he's like, well, let's do Paris. And I said, okay, I'm absolutely down to do Paris. And so I look at flights. I book a flight from Boston to Paris with a layover in Iceland, and I leave on the 26th, and I get to Paris on the 27th, and I see him. He meets me at the airport. We arranged our flights to make sure we landed around the same time. And something I need to add is before I had gone to Paris, he had told me that he had made a transfer from his business account to his personal account. And obviously in the States, when you make a transfer like that, it's just like a click of a button. Like, I have a business account, it's a click of a button. But he told me that in Denmark, when you make a transfer from your business account to your personal account, it actually has to go through the IRS. They take out the taxes and then they deposit the money into your personal account. And I'm over here thinking like that's so crazy, but I also know like Denmark is a foreign country that I don't know anything about. I didn't question it for a second. And so he said, I'm just gonna ask my mom to give me a quick little loan so I can obviously cover everything with Paris and whatnot. And I said, okay, just let me know what she says. And then he basically came back to me and said, she said that she will only give me the money if I spend a couple more days with the family. I said, well, you should do that. Like, I don't want you to feel like I'm trying to take you away from your family by any means. And he said, I don't even want to be around them right now. It's just like not good for my mental health. And then I said, okay, well, what do you need from me? I said, I can cover like the flights and the hotels. It's not that big of a deal. And at that point, we had been on 2 trips together, or no, we'd only been on 1 trip together to the south of France. And then Paris was gonna be our 2nd trip. The rest of the times, he had now visited me in Dallas 3 times. And so I told him, I said, I can pay for the flights and the hotels. It's not that big of a deal. He said, are you sure? I said, yeah, of course. He's like, I just don't know what I would do without you. Like, I just feel like I keep hitting these roadblocks and you are there to pick up the pieces every single time. And I'm so grateful for that. And I said, I'll always be there to support you. So now we can go back to landing in Paris. We meet at the airport and he told me, he's like, letting you know I'm not in the best mood. I've been just like really upset. And I said, I am here to make you happy. So we land in Paris, we see each other, we're so happy. And we had the most spectacular trip in Paris. Like, we were just exploring. It was my first time there. And it was, obviously I paid for a lot of that trip and he paid for a little bit of the trip too. So we both kind of paid. And keep in mind, he still owes me $6,000 at this point. I am not concerned about the money. I don't know why I should have been concerned. I should have been noticing these red flags like, bro, like, where's my money? But again, this is someone that I am planning on marrying, and money at this point, like, money comes and goes, and I wasn't focused on that. I was just focused on us. So we finish our trip in Paris, say our goodbyes, and we start just, getting depressed as we always do when we say goodbye. And I board my flight to Dallas, and he asked me, what are your thoughts on us meeting with an immigration attorney just to get an idea of what the process entails? And I said, absolutely, I would love to do that. Obviously, I had Googled and looked into a few things, but nothing concrete. At the time, one of my best friends was working part-time for immigration attorneys. So I reached out to her. I said, hey, can I get her contact information? And she said, yeah, of course. She gives me her contact information. And I call her, we set up a meeting, and obviously, still the time difference. He had a work trip in Norway that he was at. And at this point, also, little side note, we had started sharing our locations while we were in Paris. So I had his location at this point, and I could see that he was in Norway. And he also FaceTimed me from the hotel room. So he was in Norway, 100%. And we had a call with the lawyer, and we were discussing the process, and she tells us it's gonna take 18 months for you guys to get all of this process after the time you get married. And I was like, 18 months? She's like, everything is super backed up because of COVID. I always wanna let my clients know this stuff so that they are fully prepared. And I just felt like that sounded like such a long time. But we finished the conversation with the lawyer, and I then call my ex, and we're talking, debriefing on everything. And there's 2 different types of ways to get a permanent residency in the United States. There's consular processing, and then there's another way where you basically apply for the visa and you're living in the States full time while you're processing the visa. So obviously, because he was still working a lot and traveling a lot for work, and because of his dad's health, we decided we would do consular processing because why not? But then we start having the discussions on, okay, but the clock starts after we get married. And that's when he says, well, I would marry you tomorrow. And I was like, well, I would marry you tomorrow. And he was like, wait, really? And now the time has come for me to drop the first of many bombs on you guys. This man is actually not my ex-fiance. He is my ex-husband. So I will end right now, and we will pick back up in part 8. The Danish Deception, part 8. I was not gonna leave you guys hanging, but I do have a wedding tonight, so this will be the final part of the evening. And just wanna let you guys know, I need you to bear with me. I do have a job, I do have a life. I'm trying to do this at my own pace, but I also wanted to say, thank you all for being here. This is not easy to share with the world, but your support truly means so much to me. All right, so yeah, we were not just engaged, we were married, and we are now divorced. So once we made the decision to get married, I remember we had a phone call over the course of like 6 hours. In one day, we talked on the phone about all the things that we wanted to get out of life. We talked about kids, we talked about religion, we talked about everything. And at the end of that day, he told me, do you still want to get married? And I said, absolutely. I'm in love with you. I want to build a life with you. I want to have a family with you. So the decision was very, very simple. And so he already told me about a month prior that he had reached out to his realtor about putting out feelers about selling his home. Because at this point, now that we're getting married, he's like, I'm going to just try to spend as much time in Dallas as possible. And I was absolutely okay with that. And so in the beginning of January, he had told me that his realtor got an offer off market for his place. And I was like, that's great. And he was like, I'm going to probably take a loss. I'm just trying to get as much as my down payment back. And I was like, how much are you going to end up getting back? He said, probably around $500,000. I was like, well, that's, a good solid base for us to have. And I was more than okay with that. Keep in mind, he still does owe me money at this point. So they end up going under contract. The plan is for the house to sell by the end of January. And everything seemed like it was going smooth. And then one day he calls me and he tells me that he's had the worst day ever. And I'm like, oh, now what? He's frantic. He's like, there's a fire in the control room, the electrical control room at the apartment complex that he bought. And he's just like, I don't know what to do. He's like, there's no power. Like, no one has power. He's like, I just paid this guy $2,000 to bring generators to power up the whole entire apartment. I have an electrician coming. And he's like freaking out. And he basically used all of his money he had to put towards like the generators and paying the electrician for as much work as they could do. And I was like, okay, like what now? And he was like, I need help. At this point, he has now asked me for help. He said, can you send me $5,000? And I said, yeah, of course, I can help you. Again, love is a powerful drug. I hate myself. I hate this. I hate that I was so willing to help him, and it is what it is. But I sent him the $5,000. He tells me that his insurance is going to cover it. He's going to be able to pay me back. And also, like, I'm mindful of the fact that his house is supposed to close at the end of the month. And so a week go by, and we start talking about plans for the wedding. And so at first, we wanted to go to Vegas. And then we looked into it, and Denmark does not recognize wedding marriages that are done in Vegas, because you can get the marriage certificate and get married in the same day. Same thing with Colorado. Shout out to Denmark. I love that rule. But we're like, it's fine. We should just save money. Let's just do it in Dallas, and then we can go do a little weekend trip to Broken Bow, Oklahoma, which is like this cute lake town, and that can be our honeymoon. And he was like, okay, that works fine. We can do that. At this point, he has his flight booked to come back to Dallas in the end of January. Now we're in 2023. And he tells me that one of his really close friends that owns a plumbing business, and my ex was actually godfather of this man's son. This is confirmed. And he came to him and said that his partner in his business is like doing some like shady stuff. He's like scared that he's gonna get like implicated. He wants my ex to buy out his partner, and he's asking him for a loan of $250,000. And I'm like, wow, that's a lot of money. And this time he asked me, and we're about to get married, so now I feel like I can insert my opinion about the situation. So I asked him, I'm like, is this just a handout, or is this gonna be a good investment? And he was like, well, I think it's gonna be a really good investment. Like, he has a bunch of ideas of how to expand the business. And to me, I was like, well, if you can help a friend and have a good investment, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I, as you guys can already tell, I'm a very giving person. I've been very giving my entire life. I get it from my parents. They're very generous and selfless. And so when it comes to helping friends and family in need, I've always done it. If I can do it, I'll always do it. And so to me, I'm like, we have this money coming in. Let's invest it. And I own this house here, and we don't have any big purchases coming up, so it's okay. Like, I wasn't really stressed and pressed about it. And so basically I was like, okay, the house is gonna close at the end of the month, and then he'll be able to like pay me back the money that he owes me, and he'll be able to help his friend, and everything will be good to go. So he ends up coming back to Dallas. We get our marriage certificate. We set our wedding date for February 10th. And I remember the night before our wedding, he got really, really bad food poisoning, which I feel like should have been another sign that this was 100% the wrong decision to make. But instead, I was like, hey, in sickness and in health, like, whatever happens, we're gonna make it through it. And at this point, he doesn't really have any money. I remember he looked at me, he goes, I'm sick, I'm broke, you wanna marry me still? I said, I don't care if you're sick and broke. I love you for you. And we're getting married and I'm so excited and ready for it. So the morning of our wedding, obviously he couldn't afford a ring at that point. And so I remember he got on one knee. I woke up that morning and he's down on one knee next to the bed. And he was like, I know this isn't the proposal you dreamed of. And I promise you, I'm going to propose to you one day with a real ring and we're going to share this with the world. But I want to ask you, will you marry me? And I said, absolutely, I'll marry you. And so we went to the courthouse. I remember I was wearing a dress from Fashion Nova because I didn't care. I was just excited to marry my person. And we got married. And I mean, I truly thought this was one of the best days of my life. I was so happy. I was grinning so big. I still have the pictures and the videos from this day. And we went to Broken Bow afterwards. And we just had a great weekend in a little cabin in the woods. And it's just this cute lake town. So it's perfect. And we brought Smokey. I remember we got burgers. I made a lasagna. We just stayed in and hiked, and it was a really, really wonderful honeymoon. After the wedding, he stayed in Dallas for about a week, and then he goes back to Denmark, and he had said that the house had closed and that he was just waiting for the funds. Sometimes there's a little bit of a delay in Denmark. Again, I have no idea how this stuff works. And so while he's in Denmark, he says the funds came through. He transferred the money to his friend for the investment in the plumbing business. And he said that he was about to set up a transfer for me for the money he owed me, which was about $10,000 at that point. And so a couple weeks go by. I still haven't received the money. I'm not super pressed about it because I'm fully trusting him at this point. And he ends up booking his flight to come back to visit in March. And this trip was a trip that my dad and my mom were coming back to Dallas to come visit. And he already planned to ask my dad for my hand in marriage. And so he's about to come visit. And he calls me maybe like a couple days before he's about to come to Dallas. And he said, I received the worst possible news today. And I will continue on in part 9. Hope you guys have a great night. The Danish Deception, part 9. Okay, so he calls me and he tells me that he's had the worst news that he possibly could have. The IRS has told him that he owes $318,000 in taxes. In addition to that, his dad owes $12 million in taxes. And at this point, I did not have a lot of information about his family money because I've always been the type of person, like, if your parents have money, that means your parents have money. That does not mean you have money. So I didn't even ask details about his parents' finances, but obviously I'm like, if his parents owe $12 million in taxes, they got money. And he said that the person that was doing his taxes for years and years and also doing his dad's taxes was one of his childhood friends that owns an accounting firm. And he's like, we've been paying a lot of money in taxes over the years, so someone must be committing some sort of fraud at this point. And so I'm obviously freaking out. This is a lot of money that he owes. So he said, you know what, I'm going to use the rest of the proceeds from selling my home. And in addition to that, he told me at this point he owns 3 different watches. He owns 2 Rolexes and a Patek watch, which if you're not a watch person, these are very expensive watches. And so a couple hours go by. He's like, I sold my Patek watch, and like he said, he sold it at a loss. He just needed to get the money. He said he's short about $30K. And so he tells me that he's going to reach out to his parents, and his parents are like, we don't care. Like, this is not our problem. This is your problem. Figure it out. And he starts to just continue spiraling. And so he tells me he's going to reach out to 2 of his childhood friends, one of which he was with this friend whenever we met in Croatia. So I knew they'd been friends for a while, and then another childhood friend. And he told me, I've helped out these friends so much in the past, and it's almost like he was communicating to me that he was owed this money from them. I've never asked friends for money before, so this is not anything that I'm comfortable with, but I was like, hey, if you feel comfortable doing this, go for it. I had not offered him a cent. So he comes back, says he's going to get $10,000 from one friend and then $5,000 from another friend. And I was like, that's so nice of them. He's like, I've honestly helped them so much in the past that I'm grateful that they're helping me when I'm in need. And so at this point, he's short $15,000. And so he just comes right out and asks me, can I borrow it? And I did not say yes right away. I said, listen, I have to pay my taxes too, because I was working at an accounting firm. Obviously that's W-2 income, but I was also doing real estate and I did very well the year before. So I owed a pretty penny in taxes, and it's March of 2023. So my taxes are coming up pretty soon. And so I told him, I'm like, I'm not comfortable giving you this money because, I have to pay taxes too. And now my savings is really starting to I'm starting to feel like the financial impact, and it's starting to stress me out. And he said, I hired a law firm. They've already looked into my tax records. They've already found indicators of fraud. I think I'm going to be able to get this turned around really quickly. And my biggest worry and concern is that if I don't pay this tax bill, it's going to affect my chances of getting a green card. And that's when I start to panic. And now I realize that I was just in a very toxic cycle of emotional manipulation. But after some time, he talks me into loaning him the $15,000. And I remember I only could send him like $3,000 at a time. And so I remember it was like over like the course of 5 days. And like every day he'd be like, hey, don't forget to send the payment. And everything about this felt so wrong in my soul, but I did it anyways. And this was not something that I kept quiet about. Like I told my parents, I told my siblings, like my ex got this crazy tax bill, and they were all aware that we were going through this like financial hiccup, and I didn't like want to be presented as these people with money. So I was very upfront and honest about it. And like you can ask a lot of my friends, like I told a lot of my close people about this situation. And quick side note, I did not tell them that I was loaning him money. I just told them that he owed a lot of money, and I told them about the overall situation. But at this point, no one knows that I have given him any money. So I ended up giving him the money. He's so grateful. He's like, thank you so much for helping me out. And so about like 5 days later, he flies to Dallas to come and visit. And my parents came to visit maybe a couple days after he came. And at this point, he's staying in the living room, not in the bed with me, but he could not go to a hotel because we're like trying to be mindful with spending. So my parents definitely started to bond with my ex a lot more over this trip. Like I remember my dad brought him this Nigerian Igbo cane that my ex had been admiring, that my dad had one. He surprised him, brought him one from Nigeria, and he actually took my dad out and asked him for my hand in marriage, even though we were already married. And my dad said yes, and my dad also broke coconut in front of the family and like welcomed my ex into the family. It's just, it was really special. Obviously, we were dealing with a lot of financial stress, but I want you all to know that like I was happy a majority of the time, regardless of the stress I was going through, which is just insane to understand. But after a week, we ended up going to Cabo for one of my childhood friends' wedding. And I had paid for the portion of the wedding already because I had been planning on going by myself. And then obviously I got into a relationship, so I just had to pay like a little extra to add someone to the reservation. But we decided to go a couple days early and celebrate like our honeymoon. And so our flight comes and he's staying in the living room. My parents are sleeping in the guest bedroom. And I wake up and I get a text from him. And he says, hey, can you come downstairs real quick? And I said, of course. So I go downstairs. I'm like, what's up? He said, one of my friends, the friend that he had received $5,000 from for the tax bill, reached out to me and said he's freaking out because his wife really wants to buy this house. And he's short a certain amount of money to purchase this home. And obviously he was like, I feel so bad because he loaned it to me because he was trying to help me out. And my biggest strength and weakness is empathy. And when I saw him hurting because his friend was not able to do something because of the money he had loaned my ex, and at this point I felt like the friend had loaned us the money. It wasn't like he loaned my ex the money because we were married. And so I do something so stupid and idiotic. I end up loaning him an additional $3,000 not even a week after I had already given him $15,000. So I actually ended up giving him $18,000 in the month of March of 2023. Yes, I'm sick to my stomach. So I can send him the money. We end up going to the airport, fly to Cabo. We have an amazing trip. And at this point, I had just hard launched him on my Instagram Valentine's Day prior. So at this point, I hard launched him after we were already married. And we were in Cabo, and I'm like posting more photos of him on my social media. And I'm going through my Instagram story views, and I'm looking at the names, and I'm seeing all of these Danish names. And I can tell they're Danish names because there's a different Danish alphabet. And so I'm clicking some of the profiles, and a lot of them you can see like my ex is like the mutual, like follows them. And so I brought it up to him like, hey, all these Danish people are watching my story, but I thought it was weird that no one was like following me. I'm like, these are your friends. Like, and I wanted him to maintain the same friendships in Denmark, even though he was moving to the States, because I never want to be the type of person that takes a man away from like his friends and family. And so I remember I'm clicking profiles, and I click a girl's profile, and I look at the first picture and I see my ex's dog. And that's something that I actually haven't mentioned. My ex did have a dog, and every time he came to visit, he had a friend that was watching the dog. And whenever he sold his place and decided that he was going to spend more time in Dallas, his dog ended up getting adopted by some people because he's like, I just am not home enough. And at first I told him like, bring the dog to Dallas. Like I wanted the dog to come. He's like, no, it's fine. Like that does not make sense to do. And I supported his decision. And he told me that the ex could not take the dog because she was in med school and was constantly out of the home, and she just did not have the capacity to take care of the dog. But I see his dog, and it's like a duck-toller retriever. I think duck-tolling retriever. I think that's how you say it. I saw his dog as a puppy on this girl's profile, and I clicked the tag, and my ex is tagged. And so I look at him, I go, "Is this your ex-girlfriend?" He was like, "Oh yeah, it is." I was like, "Oh, so she's watching my stories." He's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Okay, that's a little weird." And I remember checking like throughout the course of like every day for like a week, and like all these Danish people are still watching my story every day. And I'm like, don't you think this is weird that there's like 15 Danish people watching my story every day? And he was like, honestly, I just feel like they're a little bit salty that I like moved on. I'm moving to America. Like, I think they might be a little salty. And he said, you should just block them all. Like, I'm not gonna lie, this is like a very toxic group of people. And so I was like, is that what you want me to do? He said, yeah, just block them all. Like, they're not here for the right reasons. They're just looking to like creep, and they're probably just talking a bunch of shit. So I said, okay. And I decided to block them all. And so basically we come back from Cabo, he stays for about a month, and then he goes back to Denmark. And at this point, he had come to visit me so many times. And so I decided, now's my time to go spend time with him in Europe. And with his dad's health and his work, it made sense for me to just, go out of my way to try to spend time with him. And I could work remote at the time. And so I board a flight and I head to Denmark for the first time. And I land in Denmark, and I will continue on in part 10. The Danish Deception, part 10. So I land in Denmark after a couple of layovers, and my ex is waiting after baggage claim. He's waving a Danish flag, and I'm just so excited to be in Denmark for the first time. And so we land, we go to one of his friends' homes because we're staying there for the night. We change, and we go directly to an Easter lunch with him and all of his childhood friends. So I walk in, and everyone is just so, so nice. And it's his childhood friends and like their wives and girlfriends. And everyone was just super kind to me. We were drinking, having fun. After a while, I was super jet lagged. So we ended up going back to his friend's house. That's where we stayed that night. And the following day, he gives me the hometown tour. So he shows me where he got baptized. He shows me his elementary school, and we're just exploring. And I just feel so grateful to like see his roots, see where he grew up. And after the day of exploring, we go to his parents' house, and this is my first time meeting his parents, and I am so, so nervous. I've always done really well with parents, but this is, different situation because, number one, there's not a whole lot of Black people in Denmark, so they're not used to meeting people that look like me. Also, this man has made it very clear that he's moving to America, so you can only imagine how a mother might feel about the woman that's moving her son 5,000 miles away. So I was really, really nervous, but I'm not even kidding. The second I walked in, me and his mom instantly connected. And I think we bonded over our mutual love for my ex. And so it was his parents and his sister and her boyfriend that she had just recently started dating were all at this dinner. She cooked a very traditional Danish meal. It's called flæskesteg. I remember I had seconds, I had thirds. I think that made her fall in love with me even more because what mother doesn't want a girl that's going to eat their food? And so I brought her like a bunch of gifts, her and his father. I brought them gifts from Dallas, and we just really bonded that first day. She brought out all these photo albums and was showing me like my ex's childhood photos, and it was a really special night. And I remember my ex kept being like, are you sure you're okay with staying here? Because one thing I will say is they lived in a very, very humble home. And listen, I know there's billionaires out there that drive Honda Civics, so I don't judge. I'm never the type of person being like, why are you guys staying in this small house? Spend your money the way you want to spend your money. So I didn't think anything of it. But I was a little bit surprised. And also Denmark is not the type of place that has all these like big houses. Like a lot of the homes are small regardless of if you have money. But again, didn't think anything of it. So we have a great dinner. The following day, we start going and having these like day trips all over Denmark and going to explore. And it's always me, my ex, and his parents. And one day we went to this area called Skagen, which is the most northern part of Denmark. And it's really beautiful. And it was just fun to go and explore. And we're driving home, and my ex starts yelling at his dad. His dad is yelling back. They just start going at it. And obviously they're speaking Danish. I have no clue what they're saying. My ex pulls over. He gets out of the car, storms out, starts like walking away. I get out of the car. I chase after him. I'm like, what's happening? What's happening? And he was like, my dad basically just said that he's over today. He just wants to go back and watch his game. And I was like, and he basically said he was really upset because he felt like his dad wasn't making an effort to get to know me. And that's when I realized that him and his dad had a really, really toxic relationship. And I also noticed that like they basically exchanged like 1 to 2 sentences a day. I also noticed that he wasn't as close with his sister, his little sister, because I mean, they would talk all the time. And so I thought that was a little strange too. But I don't know, I'm still trying to really understand this family dynamic. But what I do know is that he's a mama's boy. He's close with his mom, which, that was really, really important to me. There were a few things that I took away from this trip. The first being that he is a little bit embarrassed of his family's home. He kept saying, do you want to go stay in a hotel or Airbnb? Do you want to stay here? And I'm like, why would we not stay here? Like, if I went to go visit my parents and I wanted to stay in an Airbnb, they'd be devastated. I was like, of course we're staying here. And he was like, I know it's not like nice. It's a super old house. They haven't renovated it. Like, I don't understand. They have all this money. Like, why don't they do it? I'm like, it's fine. Like, don't worry. We'll be okay. Another thing I noticed was that I did not meet the older sister. No one spoke of her. And I knew at this point she had 1 kid at this point. So they talked about her a little bit, but it was kind of like the elephant in the room. Like, no one really talked about it. And, I know they don't have a relationship. They can't be with each other in intimate settings. But overall, like, I did have a good trip with him, despite the tension. So after a week, we traveled to Copenhagen. And I remember getting to Copenhagen, and I'm immediately just so happy to be there because this city exceeded my expectations. It's a beautiful, beautiful city. And we ended up staying in a hotel, like a cheaper hotel by the water. And I can stay anywhere. I'm good. I don't need to stay anywhere bougie. And I remember him being like, I hate that we have to stay here. Like, it's not nice. I'm like, I don't care. Like, we have a bed. We have a place to stay. It's okay. And so we spent that whole week just exploring Copenhagen, and then we get ready to travel to Nigeria for my grandmother's burial. And so at this point, we're staying in this hotel, and I remember there was like a laundromat at this hotel, so I was doing laundry, and he said, I'm gonna go and get a few things for my storage unit, because he's moved out of his place at this point. He has a storage unit. And so he comes back home and he has like this Rolex box, and he's like, oh, this is one of my Rolexes. I want to show it to you. And at this point, I had already seen his steel, what's it called? The Batman. I already had seen that watch. He had brought it out for Cabo. So I've seen one of his watches. The Patek he sold, I never saw it. So now this is now the second watch he's bringing out. And he opens it. And it's, again, I did not know anything about watches before this, but now I know it's a day-date presidential watch with a green face. So he ends up telling me this is like a $50,000 watch. I was like, this is nice. And keep in mind, we're about to leave for Nigeria in like a day. I'm like, why'd you bring it out? And he's like, oh, I'm going to bring it to Nigeria. I go, you're going to do what? And he's like, I'm bringing it to Nigeria. I'm like, you cannot bring a $50,000 watch to Nigeria. And he's like, yeah, I can. And I'm like, this does not make sense. And he said, no, like, this is a special occasion. Like, I want to bring it out for this. And so I told him, okay, I feel very uncomfortable, especially like us being in the village and you're wearing this like expensive watch. You're just asking yourself to get robbed. I just did not understand it, but whatever. He ends up packing the watch. We get ready and we hop on a flight to go to Nigeria and meet my family for my grandmother's burial. Keep in mind, he had paid for all the hotels, everything in Denmark, and he paid for all the hotels and flights for Nigeria. And so we hop on a plane, go to Nigeria. I'm super nervous because I just don't know what to expect and how he's going to react. But we go, we meet up with my family, and he does so well. And it was funny because everyone wanted to take photos with him, and he was meeting my extended family, like my grandmother. I never thought I would bring a man home to meet my grandmother. I felt like I fell deeper in love with him, watching him just immerse himself in my culture and be there for my family while we put my grandmother to rest. And it was just a really amazing, beautiful trip. Honestly, there was nothing crazy that happened. And he tells me while we're in Nigeria that the law firm has settled the issue with his taxes, and they're filing a document for the accounting firm to pay out a settlement, and it'll be paid out soon, and then he'll be able to transfer me the money that I'm owed. And so I'm like, oh, I'm breathing deeply, and it's awkward because I want to bring it up to him all the time, but he's also paying for everything, so I feel like I don't want to put too much pressure on him, even though I should have. So we come back to Denmark, and at this point, we are trying to figure out what our plan is when we're going to come back to the States. And he says, you know what, like, let's just go back to my parents' house in my hometown. They were actually on a vacation, so the house was empty, and we can figure out what we want to do next. And I said, okay, that sounds good. So we go to his parents' house, and at this point, I'm still working remote. So I remember I was at the dining table working, and he walks up to me, and he says, I have some really, really good news. I was like, what's up? He said, my realtor just reached out to me and said there's a very wealthy family that is interested in purchasing this apartment complex. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the best news in the world. And he said, there is one caveat, and I will continue on in part 11.